It is 1 p.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Mountain Time, 3 p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Western European Time, 10 p.m. Central European Time, 11 p.m. Eastern European Time, midnight further Eastern European Time, and we are online on YouTube. Today is Holy Saturday, the day that Jesus' body was in the grave, before his resurrection on Easter. So, thank you all for being here, and God bless everyone in the chat. Without you, I would not be able to do this, so I'm very grateful for your participation. Before we look at today's stories, let me just say this. If you want to support my work, you can send a super chat. Just click the little dollar sign right under the chat and send whichever amount you want. It's all greatly appreciated. All super chats will be read out in the live stream as long as you keep them clean. I don't want to get my channel flagged, so no crazy stuff, no anti-Semitism, no racism, and if anyone wonders, anti-Islam is not racism. You can also support me through PayPal and Patreon. Just look at the links in the information box under this live stream, or by buying some of my merchandise. There's a link for that too under the live stream. So again, welcome, and I hope all of you will have a wonderful Easter or Resurrection Day. So let's have a look at the chat and see what's going on. So again, welcome, and I hope all of you will have a wonderful Easter or Resurrection. Oh wow, I forgot to turn off my own sound. Sorry about that. First of all, I'd like to talk about the American pastor Andrew Brunson. Brunson has been an evangelical pastor in Izmir, Turkey for 23 years before he was arrested in October 2016. Brunson was imprisoned by the Turkish authorities, accused of being a member of the Gulen movement. The Gulen movement is an Islamic movement and a former ally of Turkey's ruling party, the Justice and Development Party. Well, a former ally. They are not good friends anymore, and Brunson was accused of being a member of the Gulen movement. As a response to this, Pastor Andrew Brunson has said that, quote, "I am not a member of an Islamic movement. I have never seen any member of FETÖ in my life," close quote. FETÖ is the Gulen movement. Brunson's charges have been amended to include spying and attempting to overthrow the Turkish government. And Ihsan Özbek, chairman of the Association of Protestant Churches in Turkey, said, quote, "Andrew was a normal American Christian. He is not a spy. I know him," close quote. On Wednesday, March 28, 2018, Republican Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina, which happens to be Brunson's home state, visited Pastor Andrew Brunson in Buka prison in Izmir, Turkey. Senator Tillis said in a statement following the visit, quote, "Pastor Brunson is helped by his love for his family and his faith in God, but his health has deteriorated. He has lost 50 pounds and spends 24 hours a day in a cell with limited human contact," close quote. Andrew Brunson is married with 3 children. His trial will begin on April 16th. Soner Tufan, spokesperson for the Association of Protestant Churches in Turkey, said about Brunson, quote, "To claim that Andrew was a FETÖ executive and sought to destroy this country is like an insult and offense to reason. Who would believe such a thing? He has spent an important part of his life trying to stay in this country, telling about Jesus in all his sermons and works. How could such a person be a member or executive of an Islamic order?" Close quote. We need to pray for Pastor Andrew Brunson, for his upcoming court case, for his family, and for the Christians in Turkey. We need to pray for revival in Turkey. So now we have 8 people watching, and that's great. So thank you all for being here. Remember that without you, I would not be able to do this. I'm very grateful for all the people taking the time to participate in this live stream. So let's talk about the Islamization of Europe. On Wednesday, Frans Timmermans, first vice president of the European Commission, shared a roundtable with 10 European imams from 6 EU member states, from Belgium, Bulgaria, France, Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands. After the meeting, Timmermans said, quote, "The Commission is strongly committed to promoting diversity in Europe. Islam is part of our history, Islam is part of our present, and Islam will be part of our future," close quote. The European Commission functions as the government of the European Union, consisting of 28 members, one from every member state. Obviously, the Commission does not have the well-being of Europe in their minds since they promote Islam. Timmermans is right about Islam being a part of European history. Europe has been invaded by Islam before. The Iberian Peninsula was under Islamic rule for almost 800 years. The Balkans, including Greece and Bulgaria, was under Ottoman Islamic rule for centuries. Islamic forces almost conquered Central Europe. They were stopped by Polish King John Sobieski and his winged hussars at the gates of Vienna in 1683. This victory confined Islam to the Balkans. We should all thank God for the Iberian Reconquista, for John Sobieski and his winged hussars. The European Commission should study history and the present. Just show me one Islamic country that is peaceful and where you can live peacefully as a non-Muslim. One is enough. My friend, the ex-Muslim anti-caliph of Uppsala, also known as Muhammad Omar, wrote an article today for the Swedish site Det goda samhället, a name meaning the good society. The headline of my friend's article is Europe opened the door for Islamic terror. And what the anti-caliph is talking about is how naive and Islam-friendly migration policies led to Islamic terror in Europe. He mentions two of the recent terrorist attacks in France. On March 29th, a car driver tried to run over soldiers at a military establishment in the southeast of France. And on March 23rd, a jihadist named Radouare Lakhti, 25 years old, and a French citizen of Moroccan background, shot 4 people while taking hostages in Carcassonne, France. Among his victims was the French policeman Arnaud Beltrame, a devout Roman Catholic who took the place of a female hostage. Beltrame became a martyr, and as the anti-caliph points out in his article, a Christian martyr is someone who dies for his faith, while an Islamic martyr is someone who dies while killing for his faith. I would like to quote from the anti-caliph's article, quote, "The struggle between civilizations that Samuel P. Huntington wrote about in his book from 1996 is now going on within our countries. Huntington thought that Islam has bloody borders. These borders go right over Paris, Stockholm, London, and Berlin. There is no border between the Islamic world and the Western world. The two have merged." Close quote. Sadly, my ex-Muslim friend is right. We have, or our leaders have invited a Trojan horse called Islam. And we now have 10 people watching, and that's wonderful. I hope you're all having a great afternoon or evening, well, depending on in which part of the world you are. And I'm very happy about you all being here. So thank you very much for that. And well, hello to Mikal, hello to Pukasko Vlad. And let's see, Paolo Forever 2 says something here. He says, "Can you believe that there are European people going for a vacation to Turkey? The numbers of European tourists in Turkey should drop to 0. I agree completely, Paolo. I boycott, well, by proxy, I boycott all Islamic countries. I'm not traveling to any of them, unless God tells me to. Then and only then would I go to an Islamic country. But otherwise, I'm boycotting them. Because, well, I don't want to give any money to these countries. I don't want to feed their leaders or their political systems. Oh, John Jakes, hello to you. John Jakes says, hi from John Jakes in Bradford, UK. Amazing show. Oh, thank you very much. I would also like to talk a little about Sweden. There is always something to say about Sweden, sadly. The laughing stock of the West, although it seems like Canada might be competing with Sweden over that title. But today, I'll talk about Sweden. As I mentioned in This Week in Sweden, in the video that I uploaded yesterday, the Swedish Minister for Digitalization, Green Party member Peter Eriksson, has stated that, quote, "Until now, it has been too easy to say anything online," close quote. Peter Eriksson wants to change that. He wants to ban what he calls troll accounts. Eriksson thinks that everyone should be forced to write under their own name on social media, and the Swedish government intends to have a meeting with Google and Facebook. This does not look well. And the Social Democrats, the largest party in the Swedish government, now says that they want to stop hate preachers from entering Sweden, including political extremists. Asked about this, Anders Ygeman, who is leader of the Social Democratic Parliamentarian Group, spoke of Muslim and Christian extremists and right-wing extremists. I wonder who he considers to be a Christian extremist. Westboro Baptist Church, Franklin Graham, anyone who actually believes in the Bible. And who does he consider to be a right-wing extremist? Tommy Robinson? Lawrence Southern? Me? It still does not look well, Sweden. Norwegian TV show host Fredrik Skavlan, who hosts the Swedish-Norwegian TV show Skavlan, recently stated that Sweden is obsessed with gender. When he interviewed Swedish swimmer Sara Sjöström back in January this year, he asked her if she was hiring anyone to help her clean up her Stockholm apartment. For this question, he was heavily criticized in Sweden. Not by Sjöström, though. She didn't think Skavlan's question was wrong, but the politically correct mainstream media and like-minded people criticized Skavlan for being sexist. Skavlan backfired in the Swedish podcast Schulman Show and stated that Sweden is obsessed with gender. In this case, I think that Skavlan is right. If you would take an American ivory tower university and make it a country, you would get Sweden. Also, it was reported that about 10% of Sweden's municipalities give welfare benefits to illegal aliens, to people who have been denied residence permits. In a survey conducted by the Swedish license payer-funded public broadcaster SVT, 23 municipalities responded that they are paying out welfare benefits to illegal aliens. 244 municipalities responded to the survey, out of Sweden's 290 municipalities. So, Sweden does not look great right now. I really hope for a big change in the general election in September this year. So now there are 11 people in here, and that's great. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate your presence, because without you, I would not be able to do this. I understand a lot of people are busy this evening because Easter is coming up. So I'm really happy that you're here, because I'm doing this every Saturday unless I really can't. And for me, the only thing that would stop me would be if I'm in an airplane, on a bus, on a ferry, or if I have to attend a funeral. That's about it. Or maybe the birth of my future children. Who knows? But anyway, I actually try to avoid traveling on Saturdays, or at least late on Saturdays, to make sure I will be able to do this time every Saturday. So Alleluia says, good evening all. Well, good evening to you. And La Resistance says, hi peoples. Well, hi to you too. Let's see. La Resistance says, how is this gender crap going down with the Muslims? Do you know they are also in the public schools? Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure how that's going to go down, because Muslims in Sweden have demanded to have gender separation in public bathhouses, or they have demanded to have, well, that the public bathhouses will be closed to men at certain times, so they have female only swimming and stuff like that. And I mean, had it been someone else than Muslims who demanded this, there would be a public outrage. But now, of course, there is none, at least none that reaches the mainstream media. There has been people complaining about this in Sweden, but the mainstream media mainly ignores it. So I'm seeing a clash between politically correct gender madness and Islam. And I mean, I think this is doublethink. I don't understand how in the world are you able to combine these really crazy politically correct ideas with defending Islam. To me, it looks like the left have to pick their side, but they refuse to. Instead, they do this doublethink. Paulo Forever 2 says, is there something like a Bible Belt in Sweden? Yes, there are some areas in Sweden. The most known one is in Småland. Småland is in the southeast of Sweden. It borders the Baltic Sea to the east. Uh, and you have an area in that province in Sweden that's, well, Jönköping is the largest city in that part of Sweden, and Jönköping is actually known as Little Jerusalem. So that's the most known Bible Belt in Sweden. You also have, at least you used to have a Bible Belt up in the north of Sweden, in the province of Västerbotten, which is to the northeast, close to the Finnish border. I'm not sure. I don't know if there still is a Bible Belt there, but there used to be one before at least. And you also had one in the west of Sweden, close to the Norwegian border, to the south of Norway. So I know there have been some different Bible belts in Sweden, but the one in Småland is the most known one. Let's see. La Resistance says, who wins then? The NWO or Islam? I think Islam wins. Because, you know, devout Muslims are actually willing to die for their beliefs, while secular atheists and politically correct leftists don't have that kind of spine. I mean, I'm not saying it's a good thing that Muslims are willing to both kill and die for their beliefs, but I'm just saying they will win a confrontation with the left. Let's see. John Jake says, I love your show. What's your background? Are you a politician, journalist, or ordinary man who is angry about your country being damaged? That's an interesting question because, I have a political background to begin with. I've been a member of several different parties earlier in my life, mostly on the right, but I had a period when I belonged to the left, but eventually I got my reality check and then I left the left. I did have some minor positions in the moderate youth league in Sweden, which is kind of Tory youth or something like that. Although the Swedish moderates are pretty left wing, but I think it's the same goes for the Tories. They seem to be pretty left wing too, in my mind. So I've done that before in my life. For the last year, I guess mostly I've been, a man who is angry about what's going on in Sweden. And I'm turning into some kind of citizens reporter. I'm also writing on a book, and hopefully I will be done with that book before this year ends at least. I started writing on that one last year. So I guess you could say that's my background. I also wrote a column for a Swedish newsletter. More like they turned it into a weekly internet thing. But you have to pay for that one, and it's in Swedish. Let's see. La Resistance says, what is the most popular religion in Sweden? Do they have Baptists? I think most ethnic Swedes are at least formally or nominally Christians, because a lot of people are members of the Church of Sweden. But most Swedes are more or less secular. I'm not sure if the number of actual practicing Christians is larger than the number of actual practicing Muslims. That could be debated. So I'm not sure about that actually. But I know there are at least some Baptists in Sweden. I think if we look at free churches in Sweden, the Pentecostals, that's probably the largest free church in Sweden. That would be the largest church outside of the old state church, the Church of Sweden. Then, of course, there also are a bunch of Roman Catholics because of immigration from Latin America, from Poland, and so on. Horse says, what is your take on Islamic cousin marriage? I see the results here. I think I assume you mean first cousin marriage here. Marriage between first cousins is in general just a bad idea. I know that genetically, if you have one cousin marriage, that might not be a big problem. But if you practice this in every generation, you will end up with a lot of genetical problems. And I think you shouldn't do it. And I think I think that also harms the people who have been hurt by it. Or I mean, it harms the people sort of being first cousin bred generation after generation. as I understood, a lot of British citizens of Pakistani background have genetic well problems because they've been marrying within their own family for too long. Let's see. Laresistan says there is one other group that will die for their beliefs, Christians. Do you think the New World Order is setting up a holy war? Um, I'm not sure about the term the New World Order. I mean, of course, I've heard it and I've seen it all over Facebook. I'm not sure there's an actual plan that way. But I do agree that Christians, we are willing to die for our beliefs. We are not going to kill for our beliefs, but we're willing to die for our beliefs. And that's why the only thing that can stop an Islamization of the West is actual Christianity. I mean, Christianity with a spine. Not nominal Christianity, but actual Christianity. Uh, I think I think a lot of left wing politicians uh, would prefer. I think a lot of left wing politicians want immigration from the Islamic world to because it gives them votes. And as I always say, they should study the history of Iran, the modern history of Iran. The left and the Muslims teamed up to depose the Shah, and they deposed the Shah. And once they were done with that, the Muslims went after the left. Where is the Iranian left today? They live in Los Angeles and Stockholm. So, well, I think they are shooting themselves in the foot, to put it that way. That might sound like a conspiracy theory, and that's about as far as I'm going right now. John Jake says that's true. Here on Bradford, it's very common for Pakistani community to marry cousins. I've understood that the same thing is going on in the Pakistani community in Norway. Uh, Sherry Circle says, hi, Mr. Sweden. Well, hi to you too. Well, let's see. Alicia Bell says, wow, I'll come in at the inbreeding part of the conversation. Well, yes, someone asked me about first cousin marriage in Islam. Let's see. John Jake says, what is sad about Christianity is state of various churches. The Catholic Church is in turmoil with a weak pope. Well, I'm not a Roman Catholic, but if I were, I wouldn't be very happy about the current pope. And I don't know what happened to the old one, why he suddenly had to resign. I mean, formally he resigned voluntarily. I don't know if that was really the case or whatever happened there. There might have been something else going on behind the scenes there, but I'm speculating. I don't really know. But my impression is that it seems to me like a lot of the practicing Catholics might not be happy about the Pope either. Well, I guess you could just ask anyone in Poland what about their opinions and compare that to the opinion of the sitting Pope. I think what happened with the Pope, he's kind of a leftist. The same way the Church of Sweden and the Church of Norway are run by leftists. Well, it beats me how he could become Pope, but, well, that's the way it is. Let's see. Paolo Forever 2 says, I agree 100%, John Jakes. I'm a Catholic and Bergoglio is an embarrassment. Well, yeah, that's what I was talking about. Horses says, did you hear about the cannibals in Italy? We have the same guys in San Diego. No, I haven't really heard of any cannibals. I know there are some crazy people, well, everywhere, but no, I haven't heard about that. So, so are you all waiting to celebrate Easter or Resurrection Day tomorrow? Which is the preferred term, by the way? I didn't even know about the term Resurrection Day until a few days ago. Someone told me in the chat. So, well, I'm not sure which one to use. I'm used to Easter, but someone told me that term was pagan. I haven't even thought about that. Alicia Bell says, which Scandinavian country is the most aware of the threats of Islamofascists? What do they do differently from other Scandinavian countries that makes them safer? Um, that's actually two different questions. I believe that Denmark is probably the country that is most aware of this threat. Uh, and Denmark have a more open debate than at least than Sweden, Norway, and Finland. I'm not sure about Iceland, uh, and they are debating the issues. They still have a lot of problems. They've had uh, well, they've had people throwing rocks at cars in Denmark too. Not as much as in Sweden, but they have these problems in Denmark too. And they have areas in Copenhagen and in Odense, one of the major cities in western Denmark. They have their issues there too, but they are discussing it openly, and that's a good start. Uh, However, I think that the country that is probably safest in Scandinavia, or I'm not sure if that country actually is a part of Scandinavia. I guess it depends on definition. But if Iceland is counted in, then I guess they are the safest one so far. I heard that Iceland was going to take in something like 200 migrants, I mean, from Islamic countries. And that's not a lot, but there is a push in Iceland, I think. There are a lot of discussions there that they want to take in a larger share of the Islamic migrant stream. So, well, Iceland is pretty isolated. That might help them. Alicia Bell says Easter is pagan uh, to quote woke close quote Christians, but most of them don't care. Ah, okay, that's what's going on. La Resistance says yes, we all want Sweden to fight back. They should take in the white farmers from South Africa for reinforcement. By the way, Australia has reneged on taking the white South Africans. Reneged? What could that mean? That was a new word. One moment, I have to check that one out. But when it comes to the situation in South Africa, well, what I used to say is we sort of just turned the tables around in South Africa. Uh, you might have to explain to me what reneged means. But what happened in South Africa, I mean, apartheid is only a generation old. And and then you had Nelson Mandela, and he decided that they should all just forgive each other, and they didn't even have real proper court cases or trials. They just forgave each other, but I don't think they really did. Instead, they turned the tables around. Plus, there's a lot of Marxism going on in South Africa, and when you add Marxism with identity politics, this is what happens. Uh, so Australia withdrew the invitation. Oh, that's stupid. I mean, really, that's stupid. And you know, I don't care about skin color or ethnicity or things like that. I think everyone knows this by now. But if there would be any new viewers who happens to not know this, well, I've said it. But I think that the Boers or the white farmers in South Africa, they really need to get out. They need to go somewhere, and I hope there is a sane country somewhere who can take them in. If it's Botswana, if it's South Africa, of course not. If it's Botswana, if it's Australia, if it's Sweden, I'm not sure if Sweden is that safe, but well, okay. If it's the US, well, something has to be done. Alleluia says in Poland we call Easter Wielkanoś, great night. Oh, okay, that's an interesting name. Yeah, that sounds good. I need some water. So there is 16 people in here, and actually, considering that tomorrow is Easter or Resurrection Day, it's not that bad. So I'm happy for all the people who are in here, including a few new ones. I think some people I haven't seen in here before, and some people who are here every now and then. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate your participation a lot because, as I said, Without you, I wouldn't be able to do this. So thank you for that. John Jake says a great Australian called Avi Yemini, a Jew, is running a campaign to save the white South African farmers at the moment. Okay, I wish him luck. Larisistan says there is no country that will take them as they do not want to admit multiculturalism does not work. Uh, well, that could be one part of it. Uh, but I think in this case we also need to address that it's actually pretty much hardline Marxism combined with identity politics. And maybe uh, if identity politics equals multiculturalism, in that case I'm with you, because these ideas they're just not working. Paulo Forever 2 says, do you think that the book of Revelation is describing World War IV? What happened to World War III, Paulo? Or is that what we're having right now? Uh, I sometimes argue that World War III started September 11th, 2001. But okay, I guess the definition of a world war is that it's fought all over the world, or on every continent at the same time. I'm not sure about that one. I'll have to think about that one. Sherry Sinkle says, don't think women should be in the military. Well, actually, I think as long as you have the same standards for everyone to join the military, the police force, firefighters, whatever it is, I don't really care about their gender. But if you're changing the demands to accept people, that's a different discussion. Alicia Bell says, okay, have fun. Have to run back to work. I really hope all wise people will leave South Africa. I fear it's gonna go Rwanda. Yeah, I'm afraid you're right, Alicia. And well, have a nice day at work, afternoon at work. Paulo Forever 2 says, sorry, World War III. Yeah. You know, to me it looks like we are in the end times. But at the same time, as it says in the Bible, no one shall know the hour. And I know that for centuries people have been talking about that this has to be the end times. So I don't know. I think I'm seeing a lot of signs. But one thing I could say is that when the state of Israel was reintroduced in the late 1940s, that meant that we were coming close to the end. At least if I understand anything of the Bible correctly, because it says in some of the prophetic books in the Old Testament. Right now, I'm not really sure which one, but it says that the Jews are going to return home. Correct me if I'm wrong, because this is from my memory. So I think when the state of Israel was recreated, that points to us being close to the end. And there's a lot of crazy stuff going on with all the gender confusion. There are some people who think that Islam is the Antichrist. Maybe it is. I'm undecided, although I'm leaning towards that might actually be the case. So yeah, so you might be right, Paulo Forever. The Revelations might be describing World War III. Horse's Horse says, you have a great point about World War III starting on 9/11. Excellent point. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've been thinking about that for a while. John Jake says, what is happening at the moment has been predicted by a great British politician, Enoch Powell. He had a Rivers of Blood speech. Look him up. Well, I've listened to that speech, and well, I don't really know what to think of it, because when he held his speech, you still didn't have much of an Islamic presence in Britain. I mean, Britain had some people coming from India, some people from the Caribbean, and I understand that there were some clashes with these people too, but eventually most of these people assimilated. You don't have problems with with Hindus or Rastafaris in the UK. The problem in the UK is the Islamic presence. I mean, you don't have a problem with the Sikhs either. I know there are Sikhs who have joined Tommy Robinson's marches against terrorism or against Islam. I'm not sure what they call it. These football lads alliance, all of this stuff. Uh, so, but but I would say that we need to be really careful when it comes to which kind of ideas we import to a society. Uh, Not all ideas will work as well, and the West really depends on its roots, and the roots of the West is Christianity. Without without Christianity, the West dies, really. And everyone in the West does not necessarily need to be a believer. I would want them to, of course, but they don't necessarily need to be a believer for the West to function. But you need to have a large amount, critical mass of actual Christians in the West to keep the Christian culture alive. I think that's just the way it is. If you remove Christianity from the West, that's like cutting off the roots, and then the West is going to die. Uh, La Resistance says multiculturalism undermined Christianity, which in turn allowed Islam. Well, I think one thing that's happened to mainline Christianity in many countries in the West in the last 50 years or so. Let's take Sweden. In Sweden, there were a lot of leftists who studied theology 50 years ago. And when they were done studying theology, they became priests and bishops and archbishops. They took over the church from the inside. The Church of Sweden today is basically a left-wing organization dressed up as a church. There's a saying in Sweden that back in the old days, people used to leave the church because they did not believe in God. These days, people leave the Church of Sweden because they believe in God. And you even have some people who are actual believers, but they still think that they fear secularism or atheism or atheists more than they fear Islam. And that's why they will say that, well, at least Muslims believe in something. To that, I usually respond something like, well, so do Satanists. My point is, Islam is the greater threat here. And of course, I can have disagreements with atheists, no problem to have that. There's a lot of things we could disagree on. But it doesn't, I mean, in this case, the inner threat is political correctness. Islam used to be the outer threat, but as my friend's article points out, it has now become an integrated part of the West. Not of Poland, of course, but countries like Sweden, Germany, the UK, France, Belgium, Canada, even in Spain, this is happening. Alleluia says, I'm an atheist and now listening to a Swedish priest. Well, thank you for that. I'm not actually a priest, but, well, I have studied some theology though. But I'm happy that you're listening. John Jakes, Christian culture is paramount. However, having said that the only way we will win is if all Christians, Sikhs, Hindus, Jews, and even some atheists all stand together. Yeah, and I guess that's my point. And anyone who is opposed to Islam, in this case, we need to work together to stop this threat. And that means we can't really turn away people for minor disagreements when we have a bigger threat threatening us. That's my point. La Resistance says, multiculturalism is the battering ram these leftist theologians used. Yes, that's correct. Gent Yika says, hello all. What is your view of Orthodox Christianity? About 5 years ago, I was thinking about converting to the Orthodox Church. I ended up not doing that, but I was thinking about that back then. So I was to an Orthodox service in Oslo. I know there is sort of a quarrel going on, or a debate going on between the Catholic and the Orthodox Church, which one was the oldest one. Uh, I prefer I prefer to take the side of the Orthodox Church, but really, I mean, my point is this: if you believe if you believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross for your sins and that he was resurrected on the third day, which happens to be tomorrow, if you believe that, you're saved, and that goes for if you're an evangelical, if you're a Lutheran, if you're an Orthodox, if you're a Roman Catholic, if you're an Anglican, if you're a Pentecostal, if you're a Messianic Jew, whatever you call yourself, if you believe that Jesus died for your sins and that he was resurrected on the third day, then you're fine. I mean, in my view. Sherry Circle says New Age religion combining the religion is what's occurring. Yeah, I think that might be going on. I guess there is an idea about a new religion that's going to combine all religions. There is some kind of idea about that, and I think some people in the Church of Sweden and the Church of Norway are actually, they sound like that's what they want, which of course goes completely against Christian teaching. Horses, what do the Sami think of Islam? I don't think there are many Muslims who live in the Sami areas of the north of Sweden, north of Norway, north of Finland, that part of Scandinavia. So I don't know if they have much of a view on Islam. I think maybe in the book Absolute Sverige, Absolute Sweden, by the Danish journalist Mikael Jalving, he actually interviews a Sami in that book, and this Sami talks about how they were forcibly assimilated in Sweden. While then she points out, but now Muslims, I'm not sure if she said Muslims or Arabs, but she's pointing out the Islamic population. They are coming here, they are making demands, and they are getting their way, but they forced us to assimilate. I have an idea about this. I believe that Sweden sort of has a bad conscience. Up until about 1970, Sweden had really strong assimilation policies. And what happened was that Sweden had some homegrown minorities. Sweden had the Samis, obviously. Sweden had the Tornedalian Finns, which were Finnish-speaking people living right at the border between Sweden and Finland. And Sweden had Finnish-speaking people living at the border between Sweden and Norway. And those Finnish-speaking people, the ones by the border, I guess they had lived there forever. They just happened to draw the border right through the language border, so that some of the Finnish-speaking people ended up on the Swedish side of the border, while the ones living further south in Sweden by the Norwegian border were descendants of Finns who arrived there centuries before. Part of my family is descended from these Finns living by the Norwegian border. Anyway, but when Sweden was industrialized and turning into a welfare state, uh, they also decided that they had to assimilate these people to make sure that they would turn into Swedes. So it was outlawed in Sweden, or it was banned at least in schools. You were not allowed to speak your mother tongue if it happened to be Sami or Finnish, not even in breaks between classes. And they were pretty successful in making sure people changed their language. They sort of were able to transform these people from minorities into Swedes. A lot of people in Sweden don't even know about their background. My mother's family had a very blurry concept of their Finnish background until I found out about it through genealogy. So, but then everything turned around, and we got multiculturalism. So I'm wondering if it's a bad conscience that first Sweden sort of wiped out its own homegrown minorities, and then Sweden imported new minorities. I'm writing something about that in my book, by the way, but that book won't be out for another few months. Let's see. Gent Gika says, why nobody talks about the persecution of Christians in the Middle East? I am from. Well, I think when it comes to the mainstream media, they're not really interested in that because it doesn't fit their narrative. Because the narrative is that Muslims are victims and Christians, well, I guess Christians are supposed to be privileged. They don't know or they don't want to know that Christians is the most persecuted group in the world by now. They don't want to know that. Uh, I do this video every week, or at least I try to do it every week, called Last Week in Islamic Terror. And I might not necessarily mention Christians as such. Sometimes I do. But what you can see is not only have you had persecution of Christians in the Middle East, you have the same thing going on in Nigeria, because you have all these attacks on Christians in Nigeria. And as far as I understand, you could say that it's always the Muslims who start this. I think you could say that. I think that would be a reasonable thing to say, actually. So no matter if it's the Middle East, if it's in Pakistan, if it's in Nigeria, if it's in Sudan, where you had the split between Sudan and southern Sudan, to me it looks like it's always Islam who starts the fight. Let's see. Oh, Genjika says he's from Greece. Okay. Well, I think we should stand with Greece too. Have you seen my videos on Greece? Or actually, there's only one video on Greece, and then I mentioned Greece not too long ago in a live stream. Let's see. Horses, you should have a look at the Sami and American Plains Indians. They both use teepees. I didn't know that. Let's see. La Resistance says, Mr. Swede, do you not see a worldwide pattern in the repopulation of the West? Gender confusion, etc. Sounds like a global plan to me. Well, there is some of that stuff going on too. Absolutely. Jantjika says, what about the land reform in South Africa? Well, that land reform isn't a land reform, it's a land grab, and it's terrible. Right On says, everywhere you look on earth, Muslims are at war with their neighbors. Yeah, that's exactly my point. Even in Myanmar, where this Islamic minority, yeah, the Rohingyas, supposedly they are the victims here. I'm not so sure about that. I mean, I'm sure that there might have been things done to them that shouldn't be done, but what can you say? I think I think the same thing happened in Myanmar as sort of always happens with Islam. As I said when I quoted my ex-Muslim friend, when he was quoting Samuel P. Huntington, Islam has bloody borders. Sadly, we are now getting these bloody borders within our own countries, within the West. Alexander Westner says Canada refusing white South African refuge. Yes, I heard about that, and that's terrible. And I think it's kind of the same thing going on there. The Canadian government would not want to recognize that white South Africans can actually be victims because it doesn't fit their narrative. Horses, we teach gender confusion in our schools too. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but not surprised. I think I've heard of that. I'm not sure if you're in California or where you are. I think you're in the States somewhere. And if you're in California, if I'm not wrong about this, I think that California is pretty bad off. I mean, it's sort of turned into Sweden of the United States or something like that. Free Tanker says, what are the demographics of Sweden? And how many mosques are there in Sweden? Well, I'll take the last question first. I don't know how many mosques there are in Sweden. So I should look that up. That's an interesting question. Uh, when it comes to demographics in Sweden, Sweden doesn't have statistics on religion, for instance. There is statistics on citizenship and on citizenship of parents of Swedish citizens, stuff like that. You don't have ethnic or religious statistics, but there is a Swedish left-wing activist named what's his name again? Well, maybe I'll remember that later. But he's adopted from South Korea. He lives in Sweden. Oh, Tobias Hübinette, that's his name. Uh, and he's an activist and an academic. He's in academia, and he's really left wing. So he doesn't have an agenda of trying to inflate these numbers. And he tried to calculate the number of Muslims in Sweden. And what he did was he was going through the statistics of citizenship of people living in Sweden and of naturalized people and of their children, and he compared these citizenships to the amount of Muslims in their home countries. And by doing this extrapolation, or whatever you call it, he came up with a figure of maybe 10% of the population in Sweden consists of Muslims. And actually, that makes sense to me because somewhere around 10%, Islam becomes very violent. And that's what we've been seeing in Sweden for the last 5 years or so. I think the first riot that I can remember that happened in Sweden that was Islam related was in Husby in the north of Stockholm in 2012, I think. I think it was in 2012. And that was the first time I heard of these cars burning, rocks being thrown at police officers and so on. Actually, I think there was some stuff going on in Malmö before that, maybe in 2010, 2011, but it has exploded since then. Anyway, I guess I kind of got off the rails here, but yeah, the demographics is, I think it's about 10% Muslims, and I think that's the one group that's creating the biggest problems. Not because Muslims, by definition, are bad people, but because they follow a bad teaching. Let's see. Jens Jika says, "Sir, I'm a great fan of you. I try to follow you daily, though I do not engage in your live streams." Well, thank you for engaging now, and thank you for following me. I'm very happy about that. Uh, Jika says, "I know previously I made a question that perhaps you found insulting, but I think you're really courageous for what you do." Oh, don't worry about that. I assume you mean your question about persecution of Christians in the Middle East. Yeah, we need to talk more about that. I need to talk more about that too. Absolutely. So don't worry about that. And thank you for your kind words. La Resistance says, "I do not know how the cricket board is going to hide the white genocide, as South Africa is a major white team. I guess they may just not play anymore. What do you think?" I don't follow sports, so I haven't thought about that. But when once you say it, I think I've heard that cricket is mainly a white thing in South Africa. So I guess South Africa will stop being a cricket nation then. Hmm. Let's see. Alexander Westner says, "Am Gore at Bill Gates' convention says there will be too many people of color in 21st century." Uh, I'm not sure exactly what you mean now. Did Bill Gates say that? I'm a little confused. Jent Jika says, "Sir, why don't we talk about the real origins of socialism?" I'm not really sure what you mean by the real origins. I mean, obviously, socialism is an idea that's been around for a long time. Uh, when Thomas More wrote Utopia back in the 1600s, I think, and although the theory, well, I guess he was one of the early ones who wrote about that. And then, but the real breakthrough is with Karl Marx. So I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. we could talk about the history of socialism and the effects of socialism, and the socialism does not have a nice track record. Free Tanker says, no, Bill Gates is worried about the demographic development, i.e., population boom in Africa. I think if you're worried about the population boom in Africa, the best thing to do would be to have sane policies in Africa. I mean, obviously, no other country can solve the problems of a different country. Uh, we can accept some immigration of people who will be an asset, people who don't have crazy ideas, and people who will work for their living and things like that. But in no way can the West absorb all the poor people of the world, and even less can we absorb all the Muslims of the world and so on. Of course not. Uh, so, I mean, there are a few examples in Africa that we could look at that are some of the better examples. Botswana is one of these countries. In Botswana, they have gone from a third world country to a middle income country in one generation. And Botswana is a very Christian country. Something like 70% of the people in Botswana go to church every Sunday, more or less. And when Bill Gates wanted to give money to Botswana, they said, well, thank you very much, but we already have churches and Christian organizations helping our poor. Don't worry about it. And even in Tanzania is still a poor country, but they have imposed free market reforms in Tanzania, and they went from being dirt poor, to being less poor. The absolute poverty is being eradicated in Tanzania because of these free market policies. And I think what I think is needed, if it's in Africa, if it's in Asia, if it's in the Middle East, if it's in Europe, no matter where, what you need is a combination of Christian values and free market policies. I guess that's why I would call myself a libertarian conservative. Free Tanker says, in many countries in Africa, the fertility rate is between 5 and 7 children per woman, a great recipe for societal problems and poverty. Well, yeah, absolutely. And I guess the only way to solve this is to have actual growth. I mean, not population growth, but economic growth. And to have that, you need Christianity and free market policies, because I think that in poor countries, children are seen as kind of a retirement insurance. It was sort of the same thing in Scandinavia 150 years ago or so. So wealth is kind of what's needed, but it can't be redistributed. I don't think that foreign aid is, in general, I don't think it works very well. Let's see. Mel G says, I'm hearing gun bans in Sweden and guns taken from you. When did these types of laws pass? And did they actually physically come take your weapons? Please tell me how that worked and how long ago. I think guns were banned in Sweden. I'm not really sure, but I think it was sometime after World War II. It could have been in the 30s, but I think maybe the 50s or the 60s. I don't know exactly how that happened, actually. What I have been told is that, officially, everyone turned in their guns, except if you could get a license, like a hunting license or something like that. But I've also been told that there were a lot of guns left in the Swedish countryside for a long time that the authorities didn't know were there, that people had in kind of outhouses and stuff like that on their farms. But by now, I don't think there are many guns in Sweden when it comes to law-abiding citizens, while criminals have guns, machetes, hand grenades. That's just crazy. Free Tanker says, they do have Christianity, Swede, but they have a fertility problem that crushed any hope of wealth. Well, some people have Christianity, like Botswana. South Africa Sure doesn't. I mean, you might have churches that you have nominal Christianity, but that's like the Church of Sweden or the Church of Denmark or the Church of Norway. They might they might call themselves Christian, but for Christianity to actually change the culture to to the better, you need people who are actual Christians, and by actual Christians I mean people people who believe in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior and who try to follow Him. Alleluia says, "Okay, I need to go. Happy Easter to all." Well, happy Easter to you too, Alleluia. La Resistance says, "Now that the white farmers have been chased out of Zimbabwe, they are starving and begging for whites to return." Yeah, throwing out your farmers is generally not a good idea. Uh, you need some knowledge to handle a farm, and that's something that you can't just teach or that you can't just learn in a year or two. I don't think so, at least. So I think that's a really bad idea. I wouldn't return to Zimbabwe, but I saw that story. Alexander Westner says, "Love what I hear from Hungary." From what I hear, Hungary is fine. Uh, you know that the Green Party spokesperson, Gustav Fridolin, who is also the Swedish Minister for Education, he went to Hungary recently, and he went there because he was annoyed about the things said about Sweden in the Hungarian election debate. I find that kind of funny. And they're saying that Kent Ekeroth, who is leaving, well, who who, uh, who is a member of the Swedish Parliament for the Sweden Democrats, but he's not on their election list for the next election. What do you call that? He's not on their list for the next election, and they say he might be moving to Hungary, but he says he might be living in Hungary and living in Sweden at the same time. I don't know, but that's interesting. Gentika says, or Gentika, talk about Fabian Society. Oh, I heard something about the Fabian Society. I don't know much about the Fabian Society, so I really should read up on that. But I have heard that that the Fabian Society, they were behind the International Monetary Fund, and that John Maynard Keynes was somehow involved with them, so that this kind of soft socialism that we had in Western Europe after World War II is related to this. I'm not sure about this. Is this what you're thinking about, Gentika? La Resistance says 38 days uh, until Cape Town runs out of water. They are already killing each other. Well, I heard that South Africa is getting a water problem. I also heard that Israel uh, was willing to help them out, but they turned it down, which to me seemed really stupid. But well, Marxists usually don't like Jews, so yeah, I know Karl Marx was an ethnic Jew, but he wasn't a practicing Jew. He was actually a Jewish anti-Semite or a Jewish Jew hater. Anyway, uh, but the point is, Marxists tend not to like Jews, so they don't like Israel. So Israel told them we could help you out with the water, and they said no. So what can I say? That's really stupid. And it's not only about the whites in South Africa. You also had African immigrants from other African countries who have been harassed in South Africa. And the interesting thing with South Africa is that South Africa was really, if I've understood it correctly, it was a pretty empty country. You had some tribes living there before, but there wasn't many people living there until the Europeans arrived. And then you had other peoples arriving from East Africa and stuff like that. I think I'm not sure about this. Other things I need to read up on. But so the interesting thing is, it seems like almost everyone in South Africa is descended from immigrants who arrived a few centuries ago. So it's a crazy mix. Or the crazy thing is that there still seems to be so much hatred. Gent Jika says Keynesianism. Yeah, exactly. Uh, okay, so you mean Fabianism is Keynesianism? Okay, well, Keynesianism really wrecked the systems. That's kind of the theory that social democracy stands on these days, or it stood on it for a long time, and Obama did too, by the way. And asked about, well, when John Maynard Keynes was told that in the long run his system wouldn't work, he just said, in the long run we're all dead. Well, John Maynard Keynes is dead, and his system has broken down. Alexander Westner says, I thought China was going to help out, just for resources, I guess. Oh, that could be interesting. I know that China is heavily involved in some parts of East Africa, and as I understood, China isn't very well liked by people there. So I don't know what would happen if China went into South Africa, if they would let China in. Maybe they would do it out of desperation, I don't know. So that's an interesting question. Jantika says, Sir, you should read Marx and Satan. Marx and Satan, is that the title of a book or something? So that sounds like an interesting title, though. Oh, here's an interesting question. Free Tanker says, why is there such a tendency for political radicalism in Sweden? I'll try to make this as short as possible. But in Sweden have a long history of conformism. Sweden also have a long history of people walking with the crowd. No matter what the crowd is thinking, Swedes don't like to lead. Swedes like to follow. Sweden have a very egalitarian culture, so Sweden don't like authoritarian figures as such. Although there are exceptions to that rule, of course. But Swedes are egalitarian, and Swedes walk with the crowd. And in the 1600s, Sweden was very Lutheran. They say that Sweden was the Lutheran version of Spain. You didn't have the Spanish Inquisition in Sweden. Instead, you had it was illegal in Sweden to be a Roman Catholic. If you were, if for anyone who wasn't a part of an embassy from a Roman Catholic country, it was illegal to be a Roman Catholic. And that means if a Swedish subject was, if you found out that a Swedish subject was a Roman Catholic, if a Swedish subject or citizen went to Catholic Mass, because some did, they went to Mass at the embassies, they were sentenced to the death penalty. They were never actually executed. Instead, their punishment was changed to lifetime deportation. They were just not allowed to stay in Sweden. So they left. And there were Swedes who were Catholics who lived in Poland and in Italy. Sweden even had a queen who converted to Catholicism and moved to Italy. Or actually, she moved to Italy first and then she converted. Queen Christina. Anyway. But this has been in the Swedish mindset for a long time. And people say that Sweden is the most atheist country in the world, or one of the most atheist countries in the world. That's not exactly true. Swedes are devoutly religious. They just changed their beliefs. They went from Lutheranism through social democracy to political correctness. And what I think what it's really about, I'm realizing this is turning into a long response anyway. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. Swedes don't really have a spine. And I think this has been with Sweden for at least 500 years. What Swedes learned from World War II, and I mean, you're a Dane, so you probably have a few opinions on this. During World War II, first, Finland was attacked. Finland asked Sweden for help. Sweden turned Finland down because Sweden more or less didn't have an army anymore. There were some Swedes who went to volunteer to help Finland out. That was not the Swedish government. That was the people. There were some good Swedes around, and they went to Finland to help them fight the Soviet invasion. However, then Denmark was occupied, Norway was occupied, and Sweden allowed the Germans to run their soldiers on trains through Sweden to Norway, which was awful. But what happened was that Sweden was, in theory, neutral or non combatant, but in practice, Sweden was obeying the one who seemed to be the strongest. And after World War II, Sweden had an industry that was still intact. Sweden Sweden was the richest country in Western Europe, maybe in Europe, period. And and what Sweden learned then was that if we don't take a stand, things are going to go fine. And during the Cold War, the same thing. Sweden refused to take sides between the West and the East. And Sweden was fine. But Sweden was fine, of course, because the West was protecting Sweden, even though Sweden did not officially want to belong to either the West or the East. But the thing is, now that Sweden is sort of siding with Islam, I don't think that's going to work because Islam is different than the other things Sweden has sided with. Let's see. Larisistan says, listen to it yourself and let me know what you think. I am only stating what this man said, but it is unusually accurate, but then who know? Uh, let's see. Who are you referring to here, Larisistans? Oh, okay. It's a discussion that's going on with the free tanker or something. Okay. Alexander Westner says, what is your thought on Merkel? Is Hitler's daughter? Well, in one way, she kind of is. I mean, of course, she is not Hitler's biological daughter, but she is an extremist, just like Hitler, just sort of the other way around. But, well, they have one thing in common, and that's Merkel and Hitler both seem to have some kind of admiration for Islam. Hitler did not like Christianity. He preferred Islam. I can source this for you if you wonder, but he said it was actually a shame that the Germans were Christians, that instead they should have been Muslims, and as he put it, the Aryan race would have been the dominant race in the world if they had been Muslims, because Islam is a very aggressive ideology. That's what he thought. And Merkel, well, she's officially a Christian Democrat, and maybe she even goes to church, but she bends down to Islam for some reason, and her policies are increasing anti-Semitism in Germany. Isn't that interesting? Not because she herself is anti-Semitic. I don't know about that. Maybe she is, maybe she's not. But by importing, well, Islam into the country, that's what's happening. Horses Horse says, a lot of our presidents are interrelated. Well, Horses Horse, we are all interrelated. If you go back a few centuries, especially if you have a founding population, you will find out that millions of people have these roots. And even though the United States has been a melting pot for a very long time, you also have this founding population of pilgrims who arrived in the 1600s, and a lot of Americans are descended from these people. So it's not very strange that your presidents are interrelated, and a lot of them are descended from European royalty for different ways, but it's not strange. We're all related one way or the other. Trust me on that one. Okay. So we've been on here for about an hour and 15 minutes, and There are 18 people watching. That's great. Uh, Actually, more than I expected. I mean, being Easter Saturday and everything, or not Easter Saturday, that's next Saturday, but Holy Saturday. So that's great. So thank you all for being here. And I'll tell you this one more time, then I won't go on about that anymore for this live stream, I think. Uh, but if you like to support my work, you can always send a super chat. Just click the little dollar sign right under your name and send whichever amount you want, and it's all greatly appreciated. And you can also donate through PayPal and Patreon, and there are links for that in the information box under the live stream or under this video if you are watching this later. You can buy you can buy my merchandise. There's a link for that too. I now have pictures of my merchandise on my webpage, so you can check all that out. So now I've given you my sales pitch or whatever you want to call it. So I'm done with that for this live stream. Let's see. Horses Horse says China is buying up California and Canada. I think that's correct, and I think China has been manipulating their own currency. I also think actually China has been buying up stuff in Sweden too, even in Norway, I think. Oh, Alexander Westner just sent me a super chat. Thank you very much, sir. That's very generous of you. Let's see. Sherry Circle says, thought all currency will be gold back. The announcement not public yet. I'm not sure if you mean that the fiat currencies are going to go back to the gold standard. That would be great. I don't like fiat currency, or if you're talking about Bitcoin or something like that. I don't really care if it's a physical currency or some kind of internet thing, if it's Bitcoin or whatever it's called. The thing is, I don't really trust money that's not gold or silver backed. So really, I used to say that I believe in one world currency, and that currency happens to be called gold. And you don't need a central bank to regulate that one. The market will take care of that. But yeah, absolutely. I want gold backed currencies. And that's kind of it. Let's see. Horses Horse says, when you have a chance, just leave your chat on and see how much you can collect. Oh, that's an interesting idea. I'm not sure I would feel good about doing that. If you mean when I'm done live streaming, I should just let the chat go on and just see if anyone is donating any sending any super chats. I guess that's what you mean. Actually, I don't think I can leave the chat on once I leave the live stream. When I turn off the live stream, the chat turns off itself within a minute or something. I think so. I'm not really sure. Something like that. But also, I would feel bad about just letting the chat go on, and if I'm not even here, I kind of think I need to participate. But I'm very grateful for the super chats and for the comments and for all of it. Free Tanker says, what about the Olof Palme murder? Who did it and why? That's a good question. In short, I don't know. I'll think about it for a moment while I'll read this comment. While I read a few other comments. Mel G says, have you been threatened for freedom of speech? Threatened? Well, not really. I mean, I've had some crazy comments in my under some of my videos, people telling me that they're going to beat me up if they see me and stuff like that. I've had that, but I haven't been threatened face to face. I assume that if I would take my camera with me and go to some of these no-go areas in Scandinavia or in the UK, that might happen. I haven't done that. If I would go to these areas, I would be very cautious. Let's see. Alexander Westner says, take care, be safe, be happy. Well, thank you very much, and take care you too. Uh, oh, here it is. Gent Yika says, send me an email and I will send you a couple of books. Uh, Gent Yika, I'm not sure. I assume you're talking to me, but I'll give you my email address and you can copy this one and send me an email. Let's see. So, Gent, just copy that email and just send me an email and we can go from there. Laurestistan says, the name is, what does it say? Siner van Rensburg. Can find stuff on YouTube. It's worth a listen for sure. Okay, I'll look into that. I'll try to at least. There's a lot of stuff I need to look into. You should see all my bookmarks. I sometimes just have to throw away bookmarks, and then I realize there's stuff I've been thinking of looking into for weeks. But I'll read through this chat again after I've live streamed. Maybe not right away, but I'll do that. Well, maybe tomorrow. Let's see. Tomorrow's Sunday, right? So tomorrow I'm not making any videos any day anyway, because on Sundays I rest. So I could look into that guy. That's an interesting name. Looks like a Dutch name. Horses Horse says, no, you shouldn't. Haha, super chat. Something. Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, there's been TV teams who went into Rinkeby in Stockholm, for instance. There was an Australian TV team who went there. They were attacked by the local population. So to try to be some kind of one-man army, that doesn't sound very safe. And I don't think I can. Well, I could go and film in some areas, but then I would have to be really careful. I couldn't use my regular camera. So, well, I think I would need security actually. Well, you've seen what happened to Tommy Robinson, and as I understand, he's now hiring security, not for his own sake, but for the sake of his camera people. So we've been on for about 80 minutes, and that's about as long as I usually go. I try to get it between 1 hour and 15 minutes and 90 minutes. Let's see. Horse says, no, don't go in there. Okay, no, I'm not gonna. I won't do anything crazy. Of course not. Sherry Circle says, prayers for you and Sweden safety. Thank you very much. Yes, Sweden needs prayer, and I'm happy for all prayers too, by the way. Gent Yika says, long march through institutions. Yes, that's what happened. That's what happened to Sweden and to many Western countries. In Sweden, we call it the 68 generation. It's the people who were young in 1968, who were in university or just getting out of universities in 1968, and they were hardline Marxists. But instead of having a revolution, their idea was that they would infiltrate the institutions. That would be the press, schools, universities, political parties, the church. They would infiltrate all these different organizations and change them from within. And I think this theory, it comes from a West German Marxist. I don't remember his name right now, but I think they were inspired by the Italian communist Antonio Gramsci. I'm not sure about the pronunciation. And that's what happened in Sweden. And I think it also happened in many other Western countries. But Sweden is kind of the worst case here. Free Tanker says, China is also taking over Greenland. And I hear they are taking over parts of Australia and New Zealand. Yes, I heard about Greenland. I think the Greenlanders should be cautious. Horses says, oh, Sweden's baby boomers are just like ours. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. In America, you call them the baby boomers. And in Sweden, you say the 68ers. Or sometimes you say the 40 40-talister, the people born in the 1940s. Sherry Circle says they did this to America, Karl Marx. Yeah, yeah, I think what's going on in academia in the US, that's kind of the same thing. Let's see, did I miss something here? Bryn Rato says, Easter blessings from Nova Scotia, Canada. Well, blessings to you too, Bryn Rato. And Vlad Bisonet says, greetings, Swede. Oh, greetings to you too. Uh, I might stay for a few more minutes. After all, it's Easter tomorrow. I'm not sure when I'm going to live stream next time. I'll try to do a midweek live stream sometime next week, but I don't know if I'm going to do that on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Sometimes the only live stream that I'm trying to guarantee is the Saturday one. As I say, Saturday at 1 p.m. Pacific time, which equals 9 p.m. Western European time and 10 p.m. Central European time. That one is the one I'm trying to guarantee. So I try to make sure that I will always have time for that live stream. So, and the only thing that would keep me away from doing the Saturday live stream would be if I have to be on an airplane, if I have to be on a bus, if I have to be on a ferry, or if I have to go to a funeral, or I guess my own wedding, or the birth of my own future children, things like that. That would keep me away from doing a Saturday live stream. But apart from that, I'm doing the Saturday live stream, which also means I make sure that I'm not in an airplane and not on a ferry and not on a boat or not on a bus and so on at that time. Anyway, so that's kind of what I'm trying to get through here. Vlad Bisonet says, do another video with Sanity for Sweden. Oh, I would love to do that. So I'll try to meet him next time that I'm in Stockholm, or if he suddenly tells me he's going to Oslo, and if I'm still here then, of course. Let's put it this way. Whenever we find out that we will be in the same place at the same time, or close to each other, we can absolutely meet and do a video. I think he would be up for that. La Resistance says, Happy Easter all. Thank you so much, Mr. Swede. God bless. God bless to you too. And Gent Yika says, books are on the way. Thank you very much. So I look forward to reading your email. And yeah, I'm reaching out to collaborate with other YouTubers as well, or YouTubers as well. Sanity, obviously, I've collaborated with him, and I hope to be able to do that again later on. He's a good guy, and I'm trying to work out things with some other people. I don't think I can say too much before these things are really worked out, but I might be able to participate in some other people's live streams. Well, like a guest or something like that. There are some things that might be going on. That we'll see what happens with that. And of course, I will bring in some guests to this show every now and then. Last time that I tried to do it through Google Hangouts didn't work out really well. I don't know where the problem was really. So, but when I'm in the same place as interesting people, that will be a lot easier. So I'm going to London in April. So just look out for my Saturday live streams in April. Not the one coming up now, but a little later. And I will hopefully be able to live stream together with my friend Charles Keatington, who is trying to found an actual organization called Stop Islamization of Sweden. We can talk about that when we're in London. Also, I have at least someone in London to meet with and make videos with. So that will be interesting. I'm decidedly vague on the exact timing of my London visit, not because I'm worried about you guys, but because I've seen what's happened to people going to England recently. So I need to be a little careful about which information I I'm giving out until I'm actually there. So it might be a little surprise for you when I'm actually live streaming from London. You'll see when I'm there. Sherry Circle says, glad glad to hear from Sweden. That's important. We're all in this fight together. Uh, well, I'm happy to be able to inform you. Uh, I I actually live in Norway since 2006, but I'm born in Sweden. I grew up in Sweden. Swedish is my mother tongue, and I follow Sweden closely. Can't. It's really difficult to avoid following Sweden, since Sweden is both the country with the longest border towards Norway, and also most of my relatives and friends still live in Sweden, so I see a lot of what's going on there. And that's why I comment on Sweden. I also comment some on other countries too, like Norway, the United States, Canada, whatever. Let's see here. And I agree. We're all in this together. Mel G says, I missed the beginning of your show. Why was an American pastor imprisoned in Turkey? Also, how many no-go zones are there in Sweden? And do you believe there are some in the United States? Um, the American pastor, what was his name again? Andrew Brunson. Formally, he is imprisoned, charged for spying on Turkey, and he is charged for being a member of an Islamic movement, which is, of course, stupid. He's not. Or, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think he's a member of an Islamic movement. I think they went after him for some other reason. So, talking about persecution of Christians in the Middle East, that's kind of what's going on in Turkey too now. So that's the short version. After this live stream is over, you can watch it. You can watch it again, and then you can see and hear what I say about this pastor in the beginning of the live stream. According to the Swedish police, there are 55 vulnerable areas in Sweden. That's the Swedish police. Back in 2012, I think, there was a Liberal Party politician in Sweden named Mauricio Rojas. He's originally from Chile, and he lived in Sweden since the 1970s, but now he lives in Spain. He had to leave Sweden for being too politically incorrect. Oh, the irony! But he was a Liberal Party politician for a while, and he went through. He made a report on that in Sweden back in 2012, and I think that he came up with a higher number, like 155. But the Swedish police says 55, so the low number is 55. And the last one, do you believe there are some in the United States? Well, I think Dearborn, as Vlad Bisonet says, I think Dearborn, Michigan is a good candidate for that. I've seen some videos from Dearborn, and that's not the place where I would like to live. I'll tell you that much. And of course, a no-go zone means an area where the police can't get in without being attacked. I don't know. According to Tim Pool, there are several areas like that in the United States too. But at least, I guess you could say Dearborn, Michigan, that should be a good candidate. Horse says 90,000 Muslims settled in San Diego. That sounds like a lot. I'm not sure how many people live in San Diego, but it sounds like a lot. Gent Jika says, please check your email. Yes, Gent, I will check my email once I'm done live streaming. So we can communicate that way, or I can look at whatever you sent me. Lad Bisonet says, I used to weekend in Dearborn, Michigan for the nightlife. Not anymore. I can imagine that. If I was going out for the nightlife, I would go somewhere else. I'm pretty sure about that. And there are also places in Scandinavia where I wouldn't go for that purpose. Although, as you can see, my Saturday night is usually talking to you guys. Anyway, it's time to round this up. So if you have any closing comments or questions, give them to me now, and I can respond to them. Well, anyway, just give them to me now. And while you do that, I'd like to say thank you all for participating. Thank you for your support. Have a great Resurrection Day. And Horse's Horse says, Little Somalia in San Diego is a no-go for active military. I can imagine that. Right On says, what are some of the biggest differences between Norway and Sweden? I read there's a Muslim crime problem in Oslo. Are Norway's immigration policies about the same? Um, I guess the biggest differences between Norway and Sweden, if you're talking about the current situation and not history, the current situation would be that Norwegians are still more outspoken than Swedes. And that's a good thing. Uh, the Norwegian opinion corridor, because there is one, but it's not as narrow as the Swedish one. But you will still get in trouble in Norway too if you are anti-Islam. But Sweden is worse. Norway is sort of becoming more like Sweden, and I don't like that. But if we're talking about differences, I guess the biggest difference is that Norwegians are more outspoken. And of course, there is some difference when it comes to food. There are some cultural differences, like Swedes are better at standing in line. I kind of like that, but that also shows how Swedes are conformists. Let's see, there was something else here. I read there's a Muslim crime problem in Oslo. Well, you could definitely say that. We have areas in Oslo that are turning into no-go zones, and I don't like that. So yes. Are Norway's immigration policies about the same? Norway's immigration policies are not as insane as the Swedish ones, but they are insane enough. Absolutely. The Norwegian border is not as open as the Swedish one, but it's open enough. And well, I'm not very fond of that. So Norway is getting a lot of the same problems as Sweden, just not as much. Norway is like 10 years behind Sweden in this development, or whatever you want to call it. So I still have some hope for Norway. I don't have much hope for Sweden, but I hope I'm wrong. Horse's Horse says the Swedish will have to adopt a different lifestyle. Be safe. I agree. That's the likely outcome of all of this. Yeah, I'll be safe, and thank you very much. Right On says, thanks, I just learned something. Oh, I'm happy that I was able to teach you anything. That's great. So I guess that's it for tonight, or for this afternoon if you're in America, for this night if you're in Europe. So again, thank you all for hanging out with me. Thank you for your support. Have a great afternoon or evening. Have a great Resurrection Day tomorrow. And until next time, have a nice day, and God bless.